Welcome back to another questions and answers here on Our Walk in Christ. You can ask your questions at ourwalkinchrist.com/question or join in on our live stream at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on Thursdays. And you can ask your questions over there, which is where we're recording this one. This question comes in and says, why is it that many Christians that I have had experience in life with refuse to associate with people who don't follow their way of life? Isn't God supposed to love everyone? I'm a Catholic, but many Christians I've associated with have always told me that Catholics mean nothing, and I got incredibly offended by that. Why do some Christians think that way? All right, there's a lot in that question. Let's first talk briefly about the Catholic-Protestant fight briefly, and then we'll dive into, I think the first part of it is because, well, many Christians just don't read their Bibles. So, why is it many Protestants don't tend to get along with many Catholics? It has to do with there's a lot that could be said here. And I did an entire QA about this, focusing on the sacraments. In the Catholic faith, a person is only saved by going through the various sacraments. But the problem is that that's not the view that the Bible gives us. I completely affirm that a person can be a member of a Catholic church and be saved, but they are saved not because of the Catholic Church, but instead in spite of the Catholic Church. Salvation depends on you knowing that you are a sinner, incapable of doing anything about it, and placing your faith in Jesus Christ. Now, if you place your faith in your priest or in your Pope or your Virgin Mary, you have placed your faith in the wrong thing. If you placed your faith in Jesus Christ and in Jesus Christ alone, outside of Christ plus works, but just Jesus Christ, that is what a saved person looks like. The problem is the Catholic Church teaching tends to focus not only on faith in Christ, which they do, but they also add a variety of works to it. And that's where the Protestants and the Catholics part ways. It's definitely worth looking at the arguments on either side, and it's absolutely worth it. And I did another video looking at the specific sacraments in a little bit more detail on that, but I want to focus on the first part of this, because the first part of this doesn't necessarily deal with Catholics and Protestants. It's more of a general part, where he asks, why is it many Christians have had life experience refuse to associate with people who don't follow their way of life? Their way of life could be a Protestant Catholic, it could be a Protestant Mormon, it could be a Protestant complete atheist, and that's a thing, because we get a few arguments in many churches in America. It's basically like it's an us versus them. We're enlightened, they're not. They're just the sad little world, and we got to get them to come to church. We got to get them to do our thing and adopt our way of living. And that's not necessarily a scriptural thing. And I think where that comes from is there's a misinterpretation that even Paul addresses. Because in the Corinthian church first, it was kind of a mess. And Paul wrote them a few different letters. We have two letters, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. The evidence seems that there was a previous letter before 1 Corinthians, because Paul seems to be answering questions that came from another letter. We also have some letters from things going on in the Corinthian church that are not part of this. Those are in the apocryphal books of 1st and 2nd Clement. Clement was a Corinthian disciple of the Apostle Paul, which are great reading. They're not canonical, but they are very good reading and have a lot of good merit to them. But in light of this, there was a dispute going on where Paul basically says, hey, if a person is professing to be a Christian but not living like a Christian, he says don't associate with them. And it wasn't they're bad, don't associate with them. It was a church discipline thing. Because we are supposed to, in the churches, we're supposed to exercise church discipline. If a person is living in absolute blatant sin, we are supposed to discipline them, not to punish them, but to bring them back to fellowship. Okay? In other words, if a person is saying, I'm a Christian, but you're going out and having sex outside of marriage, that's not a Christian. That's not a Christian conduct. Now, can a Christian fall into such a sin? Yes. But a person who lives that pattern of lifestyle, they either aren't a Christian or they are living under serious discipline. We'll leave that question for another day. But suffice it to write here, the people in Corinth started to believe that if a person was not a sinner, or excuse me, was not a saint, not a member of their church, not doing things the way they want, they weren't supposed to associate with them. And so what ends up happening is exactly what has happened in American Christianity that needs to stop, where we're like, ooh, I can't go outside of my church bubble. I literally, here's a sad story telling this effect. I used to do a lot of mentoring in Big Brothers Big Sisters, and over a decade ago, I had invited, I told the church not the church, I told our program that I'd be willing to put together a program for the kids, because even in our city, the resources for that program are so low. And I knew that I had a lot of standing in my church, particularly as a children's minister, and I knew a lot of different people involved in children's ministry. And so I said, hey, I'd like to ask my church if we can do an event there, because it wouldn't cost the program anything. Literally, our church budget would pick it up. And so I went and I sought permission to use the church. Somebody in the church did not want us to do a Big Brothers Big Sisters event because Big Brothers Big Sisters lets gay people be mentors. Literally, that is what they said. Now, fortunately, my church was a better church than that, and they looked at this and said, well, yeah, we'll let you do the program, and that person, they don't have to show up that day. And so I put out a mailing list, and we ended up having one of the most successful programs for our kids and Big Brothers Big Sisters. We had people that did not want the dirty gays coming in the front door of the church. Ooh, the reality is we had one adult for every 2 kids, and every one of them were Christians. That is the impact we want to have on the world. But people believe that the Corinthian church, they believe, like the Corinthian church started to believe, that, ooh, they're outside the world. We got to sanitize the world. We don't want anything to do with the dirty world. And so we get Christian Guitar Hero. We can even buy tools with Bible verses inscribed on them, people. There is that degree of insanity in this world. But here's what Paul tells them. We're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 9. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with an immoral people. I did not mean at all the immoral people of the world, nor with the covetous or swindlers or idolaters, for then you would have no reason to go into the world. But I actually wrote you not to associate with any so-called brother if he is an immoral person, or a covetous, or idolater, or a reviler, or drunkard, or swindler, not even to eat with such one. For what do I have with judging the outsiders? Do you not judge those who are within the church? But those who are outside, God judges. Remove the wicked men from among yourselves. Okay? So the ultimate point is that we are not to isolate ourselves from the whole world. We're to go out into the world. He says, I'm sending you into the world. I'm sending you out as sheep amongst the wolves. We're supposed to go out into the world. But as we go out into the world, we are not supposed to engage in fellowship with professed believers engaging in open sin. And so many people have taken this isolation out of context, and they want to isolate themselves from the whole world, and it produces a Christian echo chamber that is not healthy. That's kind of the bottom line. So that's why I think that occurs, but the reality is such a Christian isn't being a Christian. They're not being a Christian. We're supposed to love everybody in the world. And if a person says, I'm a Christian, and is engaging these things, yeah, there's some church discipline there. But if you're of the world, we have no command to avoid people that are simply of the world. Otherwise, we have no reason to go into the world at all. And as Christians, that's our task, is to go into the world. That's our task. So hopefully that helps. You can ask your questions at ourwalkinchrist.com/question and follow along on the social media sites if you'd like to stay updated as to what we're doing.